I'm going to give you a basic overview of what 113 Count Me In looks like. That way you can progress at your own pace. And again, the Project Lead the Way directions are just for the basic. It's your job or your challenge to be innovating and creative with this and to push your app beyond what it's asking you to do in the directions. First thing I want to do is just do a quick reminder that once you open up the activities, there's typically a resources section. And in the resources section, for this one in particular, there is a video here that will walk you through how to actually make the app. Now, this way is just one way of making the app work. There's a couple of different ways to make it work. This would be one way. Source files. Right here are your source files. A different video on our App Inventor page does show you how to download and extract all of those files. For this video, though, I'm just going to give you an overview of what this particular app is going to look like. It's very important to read through the directions. I know that a lot of students tend to scroll down as fast as they can. They find the blocks of code and then they just start to make it, but they really don't understand why they're making the app in the first place. If this were a real business situation, somebody would come to you and ask you to make an app based on their needs. So you have to understand why you would make this app. So I'm going to scroll back up here. Read through the directions, going step by step. Now, anything highlighted in yellow is obviously important. You need to focus your attention on those parts. These three paragraphs here are three different scenarios for why you would make this particular app. First example, is based on a retail store. Could be a clothing store, could be any type of store in which they're keeping inventory or track of their product. Number two, if you think of like Mr. Plath or somebody that came and asked you to keep track of sporting events, something like ticket prices or how many people are coming into the event as far as attendance goes. Number three, this is a lunchroom example. If you think of students that are going into the lunchroom, how many bring their own cold lunch, how many don't eat lunch, or how many have the hot lunch, you could keep three different tallies or counters this way. All right, the next part here just shows you decompose. So decomposing is taking a big problem and breaking it down to smaller steps. The backlog is very important to read and to try to understand because this is, again, why you're making the particular app. The backlog has all the big ideas. The sprint task list is when a person is going to break it down into smaller steps, into workable steps. Each couple of days, you're going to get a couple of steps done, and so forth. Starting a new project, you all have done that. This is important to look at to see what the sketch looks like. And you can draw your own sketch in your notebooks. You're definitely free to do that if you'd like. And you can change the design too. I'm actually hoping that you do change the design. The basic purpose of this app is to have a button up here which has a picture as a background. Every time you click the picture, it increases your counter or your tally score. Now think of maybe taking tickets at the game, the clothing store, or a cold lunch situation, so your image should match what your app is all about. These are important to name correctly. These are kind of blurry, but you understand how to rename them from your first app that you created. Here is one tricky part that a lot of students don't quite understand. They think you have to have two different button tallies. It's actually the same button tally. It's just showing you what the width is and what the height is. So make sure that you don't try to add an extra button tally in here. Make the button display an image as follows. The other video shows you how to do this. And again, feel free to use your own image, especially gear it towards what your app is all about. Next part here talks about a global variable. The global variable is a variable that can be accessed from anywhere in the program. So anytime I want to call it or activate it, I can have it activated here. Now the purpose of setting it at 0 is because when you first open up your app, you want the tally to be at 0. Every time I click it, it's going to set that number to whatever it is, and it's going to add 1 every time. The second line of code here is important because that displays the text. So the first line is actually doing the work kind of behind the scenes, and the second part is what is going to display it for you. Another tricky part to this app. This shows you one way to do the app. This shows a second way. You cannot do both ways. You choose one way or the other. The video from the resources section shows this way. I personally prefer to do this way, but that is up to you as well. This goes through and it just kind of shows you what else you can do here. All of these, number 10A through E, I believe it is, these need to be done too. You need to create a reset button. Now, that doesn't mean you're looking for a button and you just push it and it automatically works. You have to figure out, okay, how can I take this global tally counter back to 0 and display the text as being 0? The next one is, this is an if-then statement. Now, this example right here shows you one way to do that. If you use the global variable, you obviously are going to have different lines of code right here. Now, this is not an additional button tally click. This if-then statement is worked into your initial right here. So the if-then statement for this would mean if the checkbox is checked, then allow it to count. The purpose would be, I don't want to accidentally bump it and keep track that way. You can upload 2 sounds. So one sound effect can be when you have the checkbox checked, and one is when it's not checked. You can also use the text recognizer, the text-to-speech deal, where it says, you didn't click this button, or don't forget the check mark, something like that. Here's your if-then statement. Read through the directions there. You can also, when you get down here, you can have several different tally options. For instance, if you're keeping attendance at a sporting event, it might be adults versus kids. So you'd have 2 different pictures, 2 different tallies going at the same time. You need to have a second screen go there. So what I mean by that is, if you Google multiple screens App Inventor, there's a couple of lines of code that you need to go back and forth. The last part here is a calculator. Now, keep it very simple in the beginning. When I click this particular button, it takes that score and it just adds 1. This, it adds 2. So it works the same way, although now you're adding 1 or 2, etc. Here's kind of the basic layout. I have a picture. When I click the picture, my counter score increases. When I click reset, this number goes back to 0. If I put a check mark here, it allows me to click it. If I don't have a check mark, it doesn't allow me to click it. There's my calculator, which takes me to my second screen. All right, thank you.